Welcome back to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast. We are so glad to have you here today. We have a fantastic guest, Joe Davis. Excuse me, Joe Davis. He's an award-winning author and speaker on a mission to bring generosity to leadership. He spent 1987 to 2025 at the Boston Consulting Group, affectionately known as BCG, an international leader in bringing integrated insights into complex business decisions, and where he served as a managing director and senior partner. He's led offices all over the United States and Australia. And in 2011, he was recognized as one of Consulting Magazine's top 25 consultants for excellence in the public sector. And I think reading into a little bit about Joe is I'm pretty sure one of his proudest achievements was working with the Bay Area leaders to bring Super Bowl 50 to San Francisco in 2016. In his book, The Generous Leader, Joe offers a 7-part guide to heartfelt and collaborative actions that transform the reader into a generous leader. Joe's been married to his wife Sarah for over 4 decades. They have 4 wonderful children, and I almost got this wrong, Joe. You have 9 grandchildren, not 8.
Nine.
Throughout his career, Joe has led with a collaborative approach, a commitment to equity, and a track record of delivering results that shape both organizations and communities. And today he's here to share some of his great insights and advice from his own warrior servant leader journey. Joe, thanks for being here, man. We're going to have a great conversation.
Well, thank you, Pat. That was very, very nice introduction. I appreciate it. I especially liked when you choked over my name. I guess I'm more
Yeah,
special than I thought.
usually I screw it up. Like I had a guest on from Australia uh, uh, about a week or so ago, and she's of Polynesian Asian descent. And I thought, oh, I'm going to really screw up her name. So I asked her beforehand, I spelled it, and it's pronounced, doesn't sound anything like the spelling. So I always ask, and I don't know why I choked on your name.
No,
I,
it's because
I,
it's so special.
that's
It's
because,
very simple.
yes, it's the
All
lemon
right.
water I'm drinking.
It's great to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to jump right in. Help helping in the process that starts years in advance of getting a Super Bowl to a city
You like that
it
story, don't you? Okay.
is um, I mean just like I think mind-boggling. And so I kind of just to jump in, how how do you be a part of a collaborative team and a true collaborative team where people set their egos aside and their agendas aside to focus on a mission as big as bringing that world class event to their city?
Well, that's a fascinating question, actually. Most people say, was it fun to do that thing? That is a great question. I think a couple of things, and now I'm thinking about the personalities in that endeavor, because the person who was the bid committee chair was Daniel Lurie, who's now the mayor of San Francisco. Although he doesn't have much of an ego, he's a very wonderful guy. But to your question, you know what it really? Because there was another guy who was president of the San Francisco Giants was on the team. So these were, some players in town, and of course, a lot of people, dignitaries in town were relevant too. But the first thing I think I would say is everyone put themselves aside. What is it? It wasn't for anybody we were doing this. It was for two things: for the city, and actually Daniel used to run this thing, Turning Point. It was kind of like Robin Hood, as a charitable type thing. So it
Hmm.
was also, we intended to make a very philanthropic Super Bowl out of it, and of course it's fun. But I think one thing is people put themselves aside. It was all of us, all hands on deck for the mission. And I think the other thing that's interesting, if it's, people had roles, but everyone knew they were just in the team here to help deliver and get this thing, convince the owners to pick San Francisco. And I remember when I met with Daniel, he came someone suggested, oh, you ought to see if BCG will help. And he came and met me at the office. So what are you guys going to do for get the Super Bowl? How could you? I said, Dan, you don't get it. We have a lot of young people who, of course, love football, who have worked their tail off and are smart as the dickens. and they will just help you as part of the team get done whatever we need to get done. So about a month in, he came back and said, holy moly, you weren't kidding. These guys are hard workers, they're smart, and they love it. But I think it's the two things, you put it, it was the goal in this case, or the mission, whatever, that's what drove everybody. You put yourself aside, and it really was an all hands on deck team effort. I mean, there were leaders. Daniel was the quote unquote boss, but you wouldn't have felt that. It was an all hands on deck effort.
So, what was it? And we'll move on to other topics, but
No, we can talk about it for a
yeah.
bit.
Well, so I'm such a fan because that I grew up in Kansas City, and until I
Ooh.
was 12 years old, and then we moved to Ohio. And what a disappointment from being able to watch the Kansas City Chiefs and then have to suffer through a Cincinnati Bengals game. But so the NFL is, I know it's a gigantic machine. It didn't start that way. And Super Bowl one, was Green Bay Packers and Kansas City Chiefs. I think there's maybe 5,000 people at it. So here you are 50 years later, and it's millions of people are watching it, and all that stuff. I just think is an incredible accomplishment. And so, if you had to pick, what obstacle were you most surprised about running into in pulling this thing off? Because this process started what, 2012, 2013? I mean, how many years before the
Well,
actual Super Bowl?
probably 2 years before.
Two? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, the thing that's interesting is you just made this comment about it's massive now, but you got to remember the NFL is still owned by the owners, the teams. Mm-hmm. Each team has an owner, and those owners vote where the Super Bowl is going to be. And one thing you discover is part of it is where does their spouse want to be in January? So Minneapolis doesn't get picked too often. Have you seen how many are in Miami, New Orleans, Houston? These are warm places. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's an obstacle, but at one level, it's like, okay, how are we going to convince these people to come to San Francisco in January? San Francisco is a very storied city and all that. That was one, funny obstacle, but it was real because Miami is just countless, and it was, they'd say, the weather. The other thing, interesting, was traffic. The NFL is very worried about the traffic. How are people going to get to the stadium? Is it going to be a jam? You're going to clog the freeways, even though it's Sunday. That was something we had to make sure. I mean, we had a number of things we brought that I think made a difference, but we also had to bring a traffic plan, which I guess I didn't think about that, but a very clearly, how are the buses going to flow? Where do people get picked up, etc. So convincing people to come to a non-warm city, and the traffic was probably the one that surprised me a little bit. Yeah. And then it's just, I mean, I will tell you, you can go on this all you want, but we did use a few angles. One thing we did is said this will be the most technologically advanced Super Bowl. Partly we had just built the new, not we, who am I talking? The Bay Area just built a new stadium, and it was very advanced technology, like you order from your seat. These things are standard now, but this is a while ago. And very philanthropic, which Daniel was pushing on. So, and that the NFL, you can think whatever you want, doesn't matter. They do actually care about the philanthropy. It probably it looks good, but they care too a little bit. And then we also said we'd try to make sure it's as international as possible. And these are in San Francisco's got a lot of people from around the world connected to Asia, so we had that angle. Technology was an obvious one, Silicon Valley, and then the philanthropy was Daniel's angle. And then after that, who knows? I'll tell you one last little story that we decided to make our pitch, being from Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, on iPads. Usually you create a big PowerPoint deck and mail it off to them. And we created an iPad, mailed each owner an iPad. And I don't know the truth, but we all joked that probably no owner, because they're not 22 anymore. They are probably not a single owner opened it. Every chief of staff probably opened. Oh, this is kind of cool. But anyway, that's
well, and part of that kind of introductory conversation is getting to your mission and your goal now of generosity in leadership and being less egocentric. That's the only word I can think of. One of my favorite books is Ryan Holiday's "Ego is the Enemy," and because the career I came out of, both as a lawyer and as a cop, there's massive egos in both. And then as a cop, we did so many. So I've been on protection details for multiple presidents and some of their family members, and man, you talk about people that, and I don't necessarily mean the president themselves, but the egos that are involved in that world is just like, get over yourself, kind of deal, and how things you're probably used to in the business world. You have strategic management, and you have processes and training and systems that are working, but so often we only prepare for what is expected and hope that the unexpected never does happen. Like it's going to be back. Like you say, the traffic. The NFL
Yeah,
owners probably learned from experience of, holy crap, we had a bunch of pissed off, fans attending because they couldn't get in
right.
until halfway through the first quarter, and so they learned because they weren't prepared. Not they as owners, but
No, just the
yeah. So
the thing. Those
how do
teams.
we get people to uh, I hate this phrase, but I've yet to come up with a better one. Think out of the box, to have that myopic viewpoint of this is this is the way we've always done it, and hopefully this is the way it's always going to go. So I really don't have to worry about preparing for the unexpected. How do we get people out of that mindset in the business world and even in their personal lives?
In their lives. Yeah. Well, I have a tried answer, which is COVID didn't help you understand that. Where were you? Because that was unexpected but I say that because, and then you say how. How is an interesting question because I think some of the behaviors of people who, I mean, first off, if you were in the business world, and a consultant would say, well, you scenario plan and all that, but we're putting that aside. You're talking about how does a person think. I think the one thing, and you talked about ego, is there is a level of humbleness in leaders who really don't get caught surprised in that they always know they don't know all the answers,
Hmm.
always, and it's, I just see it over and over in the best leaders, and every single one of them, when you talk about what are they, they have a lot of things they do to manage, but the one thing they say all the time is, I'll always ask questions. Why does this work this way? How does this? Why do you think that? And they'll ask it of all kinds of people, not just their inner team, their inner circle, because that gives you all kinds of problems. So I think the one way people stay prepared is to be humble enough to know they don't know the answer, and then make sure you ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. Now, how do you learn to do that? Either you have to get burned once or twice and figure it out, or you just got a great mentor who beats you up all the time. But probably the best way is to get burned once or twice and say, "Whoa, this didn't." I wasn't prepared for this. I wasn't thinking. I think the third thing a great person would do is, well, they really make sure they tap into an organization if you're in a business environment or a team or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'd say this, I think of guys like, there was two stories during COVID. One was very public, was Arnie Sorensen. Remember, he was the CEO of Marriott. He died of cancer. And just after COVID hit, and nobody, maybe a month in, and everything shut down and no one knew what was going to happen, he got on a video, which you can see, to the 80,000 Marriott employees, and he was in the middle of chemo, so he was bald. He did have a tie. He was dressed nicely, but his tie was kind of crooked, so it looked not like the button-down perfect CEO. And he got up there and said, we're all in this together. We don't know the answers. None of us know the answers, but I know we're going to make smart moves. We're going to take care of each other. He said, I'm going to have to furlough some of you because the hotels were closed. What you going to do? But I'm not firing anybody. I'm taking pay cuts at the senior level. But he did a very humble, I don't have all the answers, but we're going to work in this together and put everybody, now it's by video, 80,000 people, but 80,000 people by all reports, including, my Bethesda home is a block from Marriott, including friends I know that work there. they felt like, oh, okay, we're all in it together and we don't know the answers. We're all going to figure it out together. And it's very
Yeah.
powerful. The other story I say, Scott Kirby, Sea of United, he was telling me a similar story. He said he was going to, with COVID, he was going to go to a town hall. And he told his team, well, I'm going to go on there and tell them that, we don't know how long this is going to last. We're going to figure it out. We don't know where to go exactly, but we're going to think smartly about it. And his team said, well, you can't get up there and say you don't know. I said, well, guys, I don't know. What do you want me to do? Go pretend I know how this is going to unfold? It's such a perfect moment for someone to really test their leadership, because you could not come in there and be the guy with all the answers. It was impossible.
Yeah.
So he said the same thing. Got on their video and said, this, I'm not sure how long we won't be flying. We'll take care of each other. We'll work through this together. I'll keep you well informed, etc. And all of a sudden, he brought the team in by being humble and admitting he didn't have all the answers.
Wow. Which reminds me of kind of and I don't know if I shared this with you when we were talking on the phone. I'm 100% Irish, born in Ireland. So, I don't want a golden retriever. I want an Irish setter. But the Irish setter still sees the squirrel run across the yard. And so I have these Irish setter moments in conversations. And when you were sharing that, first two things that came to mind was John Maxwell's quote, people don't care what you say or think until they know you first care for them. And
Yeah.
so that's Marriott. They trust the CEO because he genuinely cares about his people. And then it's not just words. He takes care of his people. And then the other thing was this was, and I don't remember who to attribute this to, but when I first heard it, it really forced me, because in law enforcement and when you're a lawyer and a cop, it's like you really think you know everything because you got the JD, you're trained to see and analyze both sides of every argument and all that kind of stuff, and then it's coupled with I got the gift of gab. One of my famous this is my Irish saying: if I can't dazzle you with brilliance, I'll baffle you with bullshit, kind of deal. And so one of the things that somebody shared with me once was there's three questions you need to ask yourself when you are in a position of leadership. What do you know? What do you know that you don't know? And then the tough one is that nobody asks, what don't you know that you don't know?
Yeah,
And
right.
that's where you got to start. That's how you learn to ask questions, is by being faced with, I don't know what I don't know. And
Yeah.
that's that unexpected. Like I was the lead, local lead on when John McCain got the nomination. And his first stop was in Dayton, Ohio, and there was all this anticipation because he had never disclosed who his vice president was going to be. He was going to do it on stage at Wright State University, and that person is going to come walking on stage, and for the first time. And the Secret Service guys I was working with, and the leads of McCain's team, I even asked them, "Hey, who do you pick for vice president?" And they go, "Genuinely, we don't know. That's a whole nother Secret Service team somewhere else in Cincinnati. We know they're in Cincinnati somewhere because we were in Dayton." And 2 minutes before McCain is supposed to load onto his bus, and we were going to motorcade him on I-75 and then State Route 4 and then State Route 444. So it's going to be all highway driving, shut down the exit ramps, entrance ramps, all that, run real smooth. 2 minutes before we're supposed to leave, I get a call on the radio that there's a fatal accident on your route, and you need to reroute John McCain. And it's like, you talk about unexpected.
Yeah, right.
And all the training in the world is not necessarily going to prepare you for the unexpected. So,
Yeah.
how do you uh, I want to know more about this, the generosity aspect of your philosophy about leadership. And were you always that way, or how did you come to that realization about generosity? First, what do you mean by generosity?
Yeah, no, and that's just a big question. Of course, nobody's all that way when they start out, but you learn and you see habits forming. But what I mean is really what you just said about caring. But I actually think, I mean, first off, a couple of things. First off, a great leader has to be a good business person, a good manager, have plans, all that. But you and I are talking at a different level, and you use the word caring. I think of a generous leader is one who gives themselves freely, not expecting something back to help others grow and develop at their full potential. And when they're delivering at their full potential, you do benefit, right? But the second they think you're doing it for yourself, I hate to say they, but then people start to, well, what's the motives here? And then it's not, to your word, it's not you really caring about them being better. And you could care about, some people care about their teams like I care about my children. Others just care because they want to hum as a team and do well. Both forms are okay, whatever caring you want, but just to think it's all about you. So that's what I mean. Now, it's interesting, your question, because maybe, I don't know, 3 years ago, I was doing a discussion in one of the offices, and someone, I don't know, it's probably 3 or 4 years ago, and the book is, maybe I was just coming out with the book or something. Someone said, well, I remember Joe Davis being a real hard ass, excuse me. What changed? What's the new Joe Davis? And, the funny thing was, this person didn't know me. I had a reputation for getting results. It's nice of you to say that. And I had a reputation for making decisions fast. But the thing people didn't know is if I was wrong, I'd change it, because what the hell, I was wrong, and I was always engaging different people. And I didn't realize all this until I started to really sit down and put my thoughts on paper. But I will say something, I think of, this is something that all of us, well, things just grow as you grow. You said, did I just change? And I remember when I was a 24-year-old or 25-year-old first management role at Procter & Gamble. I was in sales at Procter & Gamble, and I got promoted. And I had 3 sales reps, well, 4, but 3 career guys who at that time they were 42. And oh my God, they're so old, because I'm 24. Now I think they're like kids, but and I would ride with these guys every 2 weeks. And I didn't give them any feedback because I was 24-year-old. What do I know? And they've been doing it I was scared. I was scared.
Yeah.
And it was funny. I was doing one of the reviews of one of the guys at the end of the year, and I'd written down everything he should do based on what I'd learned, the training and the manual. And he stops me 2 minutes in. He says, what the blank is going on here? You ride with me every 2 weeks, and you've never told me any of this. And what a lesson for me. Now, I didn't quite, those are the kind of lessons you don't realize it until you sit back and reflect 20 years later. But the lesson there, and my boss afterwards said, never write a review again. I did remember this, without making sure everything you say, they've already heard. We all hear that. But the bigger point was, I was scared. If I was really caring about their growth, I would have given them the feedback, right? And the interesting thing to me, the realization was, this 42-year-old did want to hear what the 24-year-old thought. I just assumed he didn't, but he actually wants to get better. So he would have liked to. Now, he can choose whether he takes the feedback or not. That's his choice, but without even me saying it. So, I think to your question, I think things in life, there's triggers, there's moments in life that help you to grow into, whatever type of leader you might be. And that was a big one for me as far as how to really grow and develop people, being clear, being direct, being timely, but also caring. You could also wonder sorry, I'm babbling too much here, but
No.
did I even care about the guy? You kind of wonder. I don't know. I was 24. I don't remember. I just remember I was scared,
Yeah. Well, and so often we throw words around, I think, like, oh, I really care about this, or I really care about that, or I'm very empathetic, I'm very compassionate. And then you ask people, or I'll ask people, or do you think you're a leader? Oh no, I'm not a leader. Well, what is a leader? Well, and then they end up describing to me a boss. What
Oh,
what a
wow.
boss is.
No, that's
And
not.
yeah, and I go, yeah, man, don't you have kids? Yeah. Do they look up to you and trust you and want to be around you and learn from you and all those things? Yeah. Well, then you're a leader in their eyes, because you're a person of influence and impact uh, in their lives. And you could be a leader, and be really a bad leader. You can be a person of influence and impact for all the wrong reasons
Right.
and create an incredibly toxic environment. Um, but nonetheless, you're a leader because you're influence and impact. And it may just be positional leadership, but I wrote down a couple notes. Um, how have you evolved in your career from, because I think performance evaluations, we're still doing them the same way that we did them 40 or 50 years ago. So,
Yep, that's very
so,
true. I can tell you.
how have you evolved from this? Because when you were talking about caring, uh, I'm not big on acronyms, but when I'm teaching cops, I go, when you say you care, uh, y- this is what you need to do as a cop. And I teach homicide detectives, which is a very, you know, brutal assignment to have in law enforcement. I said, this is what care means to me. Commit all resources and energy. So if you genuinely care about something, that means you will commit all resources and energy to that person, to that task, to that value, whatever you care about. And when you stop caring, that's when you got to step back and do that self
Yeah.
evaluation kind of deal. I want to take that kind of concept of how do we convince, or what should performance evaluations actually look like, as opposed to checking off some numeric, or how many times as a supervisor go, well, we got the performance evaluation, and if I give you superior, I have to write a big statement of why you're above average. And if you're not performing, I got to write an explanation and maybe put you on a performance improvement plan. So I'm just going to rate everybody meets expectations. And
Yeah.
that's, and what's that tell the employee? You're
Yeah.
just average like everybody else or whatever. You don't care about me.
Or you don't
Uh,
care is what it seems.
yeah, yeah. So what should performance evaluations look like, and how do we get people to transform their processes about evaluations to something that's more meaningful?
Well, okay, I'm going to answer that a little differently. But first, I'm going to start with your point about what a leader is. A leader does really want to inspire people, to motivate them, to make them move, and ideally to follow you. Hopefully, you're a good person. You're going in the good direction, right? As you noted a minute ago, versus a boss who just tells, tells, tells. And so, if you really want to do that, back to the care in the context of your performance evaluation, I actually believe what we should do is be training all of ourselves giving feedback in the moment, and not mushy, direct and clear. And if you've built a relationship, whatever, we can get to that, with the team that they know you want them to be better, so you care about them, then if you're direct, and sometimes even if you step over the line or a little harsh, not that you meant to hurt them, just like you,
Right.
they'll take the shit crap and they'll say, okay, but wait a minute, you're telling me this and this is what I've got to work on. So I'm a big believer in this in the moment. I learned that when I was 24, and then open and honest and direct, and you have to spend the time to know what it is this person's good at and what they need to be working on to get better at. If you don't do that, you're just, and I'll tell you, so that's the main thing. Then we can go to the evaluations in a minute at the end of the year. But quite frankly, if you did all this right, you just summarize what you did all year round. They'd say, oh, thank you, sir, or ma'am. That's just what you told me all year. And I'll tell you, this I learned different. I told you that one story. Another time, I told this one guy, I was quite harsh with this person. And I told the story to people in my class. I said, how could you send that to him? But this was a guy who was a high performing person in Europe. He transferred to the United States. He was working under me, and he wasn't performing in the United States. And at BCG, as a partner, he's an officer. In 3 years underperformance, you're kind of like, that's going to be it. So he was at 2 years and heading to a bad third year. And I could tell he was stressed. You could just obvious. He was a high performer. And finally, I sat him down one day and I said, listen, either you quit. No, I think you go home, you quit, or I fire you. You have 3 choices. You pick one. I mean, like that was like 14 words, clear and direct. And he said, oh, phew, thank you for bringing this up, man. And he said, I'm going home. And there he was, a high performer, get at home. And someone said, how could you be so blunt? I said, because the guy, I mean, I spent the time to think about where he's coming from. High performer, now failing, so he feels like shit. He's probably sitting there in bed at night thinking, "Oh my God, should I quit? Are they going to fire?" All these things. All I did was say what was on his mind because I spent the time to think about where he was, and then I gave him three clear choices. Now that was not quite the feed. It wasn't feedback on how to get better at something, but it was, it was an example of tapping into where they are, and in that case, giving them feedback about making a choice. Can I tell one other quick story, or do you
Oh
want?
yeah, because I'm writing something down real quick because uh, what you just described is tough love.
Yeah,
So
no, it's tough
yeah,
love, but it's
yeah,
also in the
eh,
moment.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what's another story?
Oh, the other one story, no, it's a tough love. This is a great one. So one time, a fellow, maybe 4-year BCG guy, was presenting at a steering committee meeting. So to the client, CEOs in the room, he was, I think, 30, 31, and he was using the word like. You know how 17-year-olds or 12-year-olds do like all the time. It was very embarrassing to me because I think that just, that's not shouldn't be doing. Anyway, after the presentation, they left. We were all in the room debriefing. And I looked up to this. I said, "Alex, how old are you?" He said, "I'm 30." I said, "30-year-olds never say like. Don't say like ever again." He was like, "Whoa." And he said it was very embarrassing, but I was intentional. I knew this was going to be like a slap in the face, but I had to slap it out of him. That sounds hard. I had to knock it out of him because, it was ingrained in his habitual speaking. He said, "Oh, Joe, I never said like again. You embarrassed me." And he realized he looked like an idiot in front of that CEO. I'm sure he did. We're not an idiot, but, you just don't look as like you should.
Yeah,
So another example of, but I had to think about, okay, this moment, he's got to knock this thing out. I care about him deeply doing better. This is going to hurt, but the hurt is what's necessary in that moment because this is a habit you have to break, Whereas the other guy, it didn't hurt. It just like freed him. And he said, "Oh yeah, I want to take this path and I'll take it. Thank you very much, sir."
wow. And and we're both from the same generation. Is one of the things I think a lot of people that are at least over 45 or 50 now struggle with it when it comes to having those difficult conversations with people in the workplace or even in your own family life is we were so conditioned with this mindset of if you want it done right, do it yourself.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well,
And and I had that up until I was in my mid 30s, maybe even early 40s. And I was a sergeant, and I had a lieutenant for my annual performance evaluation. And I worked 8 at night to 6 in the morning. So I come out of roll call, and there's the lieutenant. It's like, dude, what are you doing here at 8 o'clock at night? You should be home. And I'm thinking, something bad's going to be coming down the pike. And he goes, Pat, it's all right. I just got to do your performance evaluation. I figured I'd rather do it at the beginning of your shift than after you put in a 10-hour workday. So brings me in, hands it to me. He says, read it over. And so I do, and I'm done. And I'd known this guy for a long time. I knew him before I was a cop. I used to prosecute. I was the prosecutor handling his drug cases back in the day. And so he goes, "What's it say under there about, for lack of a better word, it was greatest strength." I'm just using that. It said something similar to that.
right.
I go, it says leads by example. And he goes, the next one, area that needs most work on. What's that say? And I go, leading by example. And he goes, Pat, do you know what I mean by that? And we were on, like I said, we had known each other for a long time. And I go, Bruce, I have no idea what you mean by that. And he goes, I'm just going to leave you with this thought. There's a fine line between leading by example and doing somebody else's job for them.
Yeah.
And that was the slap it out of me of that if you want it done right, do it yourself. So what are some things you see today in younger generations that are coming up that are going to be the future CEOs and those senior executives and whatnot that you're just kind of shaking your head that hey you you need a come to Jesus moment kind of deal, or life's going to be difficult for you as that senior executive.
Oh my, I got to be careful how to answer that like the 60-plus-year-old guy I am,
Uh,
No, because, well, it's interesting. I am a little, I mean, I'm just hesitating because I think of the people I saw come into BCG, younger, young people, and now these people are already hard charging, generally well educated, but they still, some of them, a couple things. For a while there was an entitled thing going on where I don't know what they were entitled about, but I think that's been knocked out of people through that. I can't remember if that was around '08. '08 knocked that out, a lot of COVID knocked it out, but that was one thing you saw. It's not all going to be handed to you. The other thing I think will be a big differentiator, and maybe it always is, but those who really understand, you got to put the hard work in. I mean, this just, it is at the end of the day. And one time someone was interviewing me and he said, well, Joe, what, you're going on and on, but what's really the big difference? Sounds to me like you just worked your ass off. No, I did a lot of things right too, but you worked really hard. I said, yeah, you're right. And everybody I know, Elon Musk is a genius, right? I bet he works pretty hard. He probably parties hard too, but I bet he works hard. I don't know him, so I don't know, but I don't think he just sits around all day and dreams.
yeah.
So I think this whole idea of it's not just going to be handed to you and you're going to have to, work hard to get there is something. Now, I'll tell you, that's one. Now I just thought of another one. And think about the younger generation, you have to, and your story was a good example. You're going to have to collaborate and team with and work with people. You just have to. And so I don't know if this little phone is causing that to be less likely because you just text, or text isn't so bad, but you just text and all that. And or the work remote thing is good or bad. I mean, I think when you're young, it's probably bad, but it's fine if you need to stay home because your kid's sick and you got to babysit that day. One thing, but those things aren't building the muscles to team and collaborate, engage, and work effectively with people. Well, that's probably, I think, the biggest thing, which isn't like an attitude about the young people. It's just the context in which they're in. And I think those that are going to thrive, they're going to work hard. They're going to understand it's not handed to them. And they're going to figure out, how do I really team in whatever way it may be with people. To your point, your story as a leader, you had that naive view that you could get it all done yourself. That works when you have 3 people. If you have 20 people, it doesn't work anymore because you just can't do 20 people's work in one, so eventually you learn the hard way or not. Those would be my thoughts. Actually, I never really asked the host a question, but do you have other observations that you've seen?
Yeah, that I personally, I think we're one of the last generations. So, talking to baby boomers, I think we're one of the last generations that really relied on grasping creativity and the ability to communicate with other people, because there was so much we dealt with in the 60s, Vietnam and all that kind of stuff. And you had to learn how to communicate with people, not simply argue with them, kind of deal. And what I see,
That's interesting.
and I hate technology. I mean, mostly because I suck at it. But I see AI is dumbing down our future leaders in industry, in politics, in relationships, because I call it the lazy river ride. It's like, oh, hey, there's an app for that. I'll just ask Chat. I'll just ask Claude. I'll ask Grok. Whatever it is, and they don't put in the effort. And lawyers are getting smacked around really good with this. With judges these days, is they tell a law clerk, or a junior, I need a memorandum in opposition to this motion that was filed by the opposing party, and they push the work off on that person, who goes and sits down and feeds it into Chat, and goes, give me an argument, a counter argument to this position. And there were two attorneys here in Colorado, in Denver. They were representing the pillow guy in that lawsuit that he filed. I can't think of his name.
Ron something, wasn't it Ron something?
I don't. whatever the pillow guy.
Yeah, no,
But
I know what you
he
mean.
yeah, he had gotten deeply involved in the accusatory side of uh, the uh, the voting machine scandal,
Right.
and which that company is how founded here well, I'm not in Denver, but it was founded in Denver. So that company sues him, and it ends up in federal lawsuit, and there's motions to dismiss uh, no motion for summary judgment by the plaintiff, and the two attorneys submit their briefs in opposition to that, and the judge rules against the pillow
Yeah.
guy, and but then afterwards he calls those two attorneys front and center and goes, "Who wrote this stuff? And did you write it?" And both attorneys go, "Well, we wrote the initial, framework for it, and then we gave it to our junior associates or whatever law clerks to polish it up." And then he asked, "Did you read it after
Mm. Mhm, mhm.
they did that? And then did you verify everything that was in it?" And they go, "Well, no." He goes, "Well, I'm finding you in contempt of court
Oh,
because
wow.
in your brief there are 30 citations of case law that do not exist."
That are wrong. Wow.
No, not wrong.
Oh, do not exist. Didn't
Do
apply.
not exist. And
Made up shit.
the wording is that AI can hallucinate. What? That's the term they use. It can hallucinate. Yeah, no, you make something up that doesn't exist. That's called a lie. That's not a
Yeah,
hallucination.
right, right. Well, we don't
But
know
they,
if it's
both
fine.
of the attorneys were. I was surprised they weren't disbarred. But he fined both of them like $3,000 for basically dereliction of duty and committing a fraud upon the court. And you know how the judge found out about it? His law clerk went and sat
You check them.
Googled. Yeah, we called it shepherdizing back in the day because you had to do it by hand in a library. There was no computer. You asked me, do I have some other observations? I am scared to death of AI as it is in its current infancy, as everybody says, that there can be a lot of unintended, not good consequences that come out of the mindset that AI is giving
Right.
these young people of, "I'll just ask Gemini or who
Yeah.
whatever."
It kind of goes. I was actually had two things on this. One, I asked a friend of mine who has an AI company. So and he's a very smart guy. He started other startups, and he's a good guy, very good values. I said, "What? I have 9 grandchildren. What should I do? Because I'm afraid of what you said." He said, "Joe, I mean, they're 1 to 9, actually." He said two things: Lincoln Logs or Legos. Make sure they're playing with Lincoln Logs and Legos, and reading long form. Do not let them read short form. Book, it could be a kid book, Goodnight Moon, that's fine for one, but it's a book, he said, that's the best thing you can do for whatever, the next 10 years of their lives,
Yeah,
which goes a little bit to if you think about what you both said, I mean, hard work was underneath both that, right? Because,
right.
and thinking, creativity, the Lincoln Logs and reading is going to feed that as opposed to letting the machine do it. And then you're not going to get anything done without collaborating with people. So I think it's, the thing that's interesting. Now we're talking about a different thing, but we'll both wait and see in 25 years. But I have the thing that's going to be sad is I think the divide just going to be bigger. Those who do play with Lincoln Logs and read books all their life are going to go this way, and the others are going to stay here. Which then I don't even know what the social impact, the social ramifications of that will be. We won't. Would be in a rabbit hole. But if you're an individual who's trying to think about how do I make sure I can thrive and be successful and be a great leader, take these lessons, do your version of the Lincoln Logs, right? And your version of the long
Yeah,
form. Not that story you told was absolutely the short form, and disaster.
yeah, and I think people are afraid of, not afraid. They're not disciplined, individually disciplined enough to make that intentional decision to take that tougher road. Like I tell, like I'm not going to tell somebody, "Hey, read War and Peace," because you're just going to glaze over. But what are I got 5 different books going at the same time.
You're like
You know,
me.
yeah, I got Chris Voss, I got Robin Dreek, I've got uh, Brother Lawrence, which is a really short. It's only 39 pages, but Brother Lawrence is a real person from the 1600s who was apparently uh, what would we say, awkward, not a freak show awkward, but was very tall for the 1600s, very clumsy, this, that, and the other thing. He becomes a brother in, I don't remember if it was the Benedictines, but it was a religious, and basically he spent like the first 12 years in the kitchen washing dishes, and he hated washing dishes. But what he did is he took that intentional path of of in everything he did and saw, everything, he would intentionally look for the presence of God. How do I see God in this moment? Washing these dirty dishes, or being the porter, answering the door, all these different things. And then people started, over the decades, just started coming to him because of his humility, his simplicity, but his authenticity.
Yeah.
And I think we're losing a lot of that, that we have fallen to the trap of be like Mike. If you remember the old, that we
Mike.
want to be photocopies of somebody or something else
Yeah.
because we think that defines success. That's my biggest fear of the future leaders that are in their 20s and 30s right now, that we haven't been responsible enough to instill a lot of those values in our young people.
I
So
think
that,
that,
and that's why it's called tough love. That you gotta,
yeah,
sometimes like I say, for our tough love Thursdays, it's messages you may not want to hear, but you need to. Um, so I,
yeah,
and to try and do it in a positive way, like you're with the generosity, as instead of becoming a taskmaster and being that slave driving boss at work and do it because I said so. You are getting people to try and look at it from a different perspective, and how you will get. I'd look at Mother Teresa. I mean, that's probably the best example. Saint Teresa of Calcutta. What the most kind, generous, empathetic, compassionate person probably in my lifetime, and did not have to do what she did, but
right,
is probably, how many other 4 foot nothing nuns ever has spoken to the entire United Nations and basically very politely, gave him a slap.
right. Lecture them.
Uh, so I don't know. That's
I was going to kind of just pick up on your brother Lawrence, because I mean, you said the presence of God, but another thing that just made me think about is he lived in the present. What is happening in this moment that is a good thing? That's your point. That's your point of, and I can learn from, and I can take with me in the next steps. And that's, I think, a great advice. I mean, you asked very early on, how what happened over the years that formed some me, but you don't think about it then, but things happen. I'll tell you, I'm a quite big believer in, as you can call it, authenticity, vulnerability, humbleness, humility. I don't care, but you've got to be bringing your human self. Otherwise, they smell it in a million miles. And I kind of learned these things when I was young. My mom, well, first, a quick story. When I got married 22, age 22, and I cried through my vows. I could not get them out. And the priest, well, not a priest, he was our college professor actually, but he's a minister. He would read like 6 words, and I'd say the 6th. And my wife was like strong as a bell. I was embarrassed. I was mortified. I was a 22-year-old guy, Well, I'll tell you what, I didn't get it, but afterwards, all these people came up to me. Oh, that was so wonderful. No one criticized me. Oh, the love in that church was incredible. And I didn't quite click, but it was my being humble, crying, which was expressing love. And then my mom died when I was 30. And the 3 brothers were up there. This was in the Catholic Church to say a few words. And you can guess what
yeah.
I'm about to tell you. I just started bawling. I mean, I could not get anything out. And the priest stopped me or interjected, said, "Don't worry, Joe, for tears are the fountains of love." And then again, everybody, not everybody, but 10 people must come out and say, "Oh my, the emotion in the room and the love, that was so powerful." So, there's an example of, I didn't get it quite, but I wasn't processing everything in the moment, but that moment was teaching me, to expose a little bit of humanity really builds, well, it builds followership is what it does, but it inspires others, it motivates others, it makes others feel part of something. And, a lot of people think that another thing from weird taught, you got to know all the answers. You got to be a tough guy. And, I can't say I don't know. It's just dead. No, don't say I don't know if the question is 2 + 2. Then you're in trouble.
Yeah, if you should know. Yeah.
But if you don't know, like these stories of Arnie and Scott Kirby early on, they didn't know where things were. The minute you tell people that, you win massive numbers of followers. You can't never know where you're going. I mean, I'm not saying don't be a good business person, don't make decisions, don't, blah, blah, blah. But to show that humanity, which is also, now Mother Teresa does it in her own way, 4 feet, humble, the whole thing. But that's what she was doing, is bleeding humanity. We have to listen,
Yeah. Wow. So I can relate to, especially the funeral, the Catholic Church funeral thing. It's like, and I'm Irish Catholic. I've never even been to a public school. I went to Catholic school from first grade all the way through law school. So deep ingrained in Catholicism, and then being Irish on top of that. And I've told my wife, man, if I go first, don't do some big shindig or whatever. Yeah, at church, throw a party and have an Irish wake, and serve Irish whiskey and remember the good times, and
that's what you want to happen.
I'll be in the jar in the ashes up on the fireplace mantle or whatever. But because so often we don't know what to say, and I think that's another struggle, particularly that men have, is we really aren't wired necessarily to be able to be vulnerable in a way. I think part of it is just genetically, even
I get that.
The hunter-gatherer mindset, I think, is ingrained in.
Well, that's one level,
yeah, one way of looking at it, but at the same time that the fear factor, another one of I have care and fear. Those are like the only two that I use in training environments, and there's 2 types of fear: forget everything and run, and that's I call it the Irish way. Just ignore it long enough. Maybe it'll go away on its own, or it'll be replaced by something else, and you won't have to deal with it. And that's not a good way to raise a family or run a business. And so forget everything and run, or face everything and respond. And so often we've all been taught this: fight, flight, or freeze. Well, we think those are our only 3 options in facing obstacles and challenges, or even good things, good opportunities. Hey, you can get a promotion, but you got to move from the East Coast to the West Coast, and you're in your fight, flight, or freeze. You don't know what to do, and when in reality, if we take the time to intentionally look at every one of those situations, and I tell people, you only have to ask 4 questions. What's the right thing to do? What's the right time to do it? What's the right way to do it? And what are the right reasons for doing it? And that takes away a lot of that anxiety about making decisions.
Yeah.
So,
I love your thing about the fear. I had another thing that developed me over my time. I had a very good mentor, and he said, "Joe, you have a very good tummy rumble, when things are wrong, but you don't want to face them. So hope they'll go away." And you're right that they're wrong, and they're not going to go away unless you go fix them. And eventually I just learned, I'd sit there like, wow, what's bugging me the most? And those 2 would go to the top of the list. And I had good judgment to know that was my lucky part, the judgment to know. But I finally got past there and said, okay, I I want to swear, but I got to bloody face this thing. Yeah, I'll tell you another funny thing on your move, very practical. Every CEO I interviewed in that book, all of them had to make moves they didn't want and they didn't expect, but it put them in different places. They got promote. Are you still there? Or are you free? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. They got promoted into, one was promoted to be the head of marketing when she thought she was going to be the head of finance. She goes, I don't know anything about marketing. The guy said, I know. That's why I'm putting you there. So you have a chance for my job. I'm not going to let you. Another person thought he was going to run, well, the head of J&J today, he wanted to run pharmaceutical in Europe. They said, no, you're going to run med tech in Spain. He was livid, but it broadened his portfolio. He's later on, he wasn't livid, that's tough, but it wasn't what he wanted. Every single one of them said the path went like this one. Now you have to ask your questions, is it the right thing to do? But none of them took this path, not a single
Yeah.
one. I thought it was interesting.
And isn't it fascinating that someone looking from the outside in, like from a business standpoint, that one of the big mantras is put the right people in the right seats,
Yes.
not the seat they think they belong in, and that you can see the gifts and talents and potential in somebody that they can't see in themselves, and then that whole, because here's what I learned from Chris Voss. I don't know if you've ever read anything by Chris. Never Split the Difference is one of his.
Wait, I missed the name because I coughed.
Chris Voss. He was
No, I haven't.
he was the number one hostage negotiator internationally for the FBI.
Oh, wow.
If you got kidnapped in the Philippines and held for
You
ransom,
flew in?
Chris was the guy that was and he's written some great books. And then Robin Dreek, who's actually Robin's been on the show. He was one of the top counterintelligence agents during the Cold War for the FBI and was tasked with Russia. And they both, in separate conversations, well, in a conversation I actually had with Robin in a book that I read by Chris, both opened my eyes. And this is only in the last 6 months. There's the four things every one of us wants, including a little 2-year-old, even though they don't know that they want safety. We all want safety, security, prosperity, and control in our lives. And once I grasped that in the last 6 months, and I'm coming up on 69 years old, is like, oh, it only took me 69 years to learn that concept that changes my perspective in talking and interacting and communicating with other people. Because I know, and you say, Chris was a hostage negotiator. He goes, we're not good talkers. We're great listeners.
Yeah.
And he learned how
Oh, the negotiator is, yes.
yeah. And he goes, and you need to learn how to listen in those four areas so you can ask the right questions to help that person get back what they feel is being threatened.
Yeah.
And in the workplace, and it doesn't have to be a hostage thing, but in the workplace, like, hey, you're going to finance instead of or marketing instead of finance, and you get this visceral reaction. Your first thought should be, okay, what do they think is being attacked? What do they think they're losing? And then you can help them come to a
Yeah.
resolution, a good resolution, as opposed to why quit? Because I don't want to go. Well, no, let's talk about these
Yeah.
four
Well,
areas.
none of these people quit, of course, but they probably had a good boss who helped them think through why this is wonderful for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that is a part of leadership that we need to learn those, whatever they call them, soft skills. But we need to learn how to set our own ego aside. We can still have, goals and dreams and benchmarks that we want to make. But I think one of the hardest things for me to learn as I was getting promoted up the ranks was, hey Pat, it's not about you. It's everything you do and say is always about other people, and park your ego at the door. And yeah, you want to make lieutenant, that's great, but don't take your eyes off what you're needed for right now. And I find
Yeah.
I find that difficult.
Yeah. Well, no, the funny thing though, of course, is that's when you actually start to thrive yourself because everyone
Yeah.
around you is doing so well. The people looking and say, wow, look what this person did with that whole team. I mean, like you, when I moved to the West Coast, it's just kind of probably reinforced that lesson, but I moved to the West Coast for BCG, and it was underperforming. That's a relative term, but it's underperforming relative to potential. I took it from 100 million, been 100 million stuck for 3 years. I left 3 years later at 250 million. So it was drastically caught up. And it was very, people, that was great. The numbers were great. But the feedback from my colleagues who were on the review committee said, Joe, this is really great. And we looked at all the partners that work that work on the West Coast, and all of their numbers are up. Which of course I didn't do it, but said all of them. I think even the second year the numbers stayed up. So the thing I changed the most in this case is their belief in themselves and their performance. And then all of a sudden I looked like a hero. And of course I couldn't sell $250 million worth of work. That's not, it took the entire team, but they all changed how they operated and it just lifted the boat. And all of a sudden I'm a hero, but the thing that was pretty interesting was they looked, the review committee didn't look at me. They looked at how everybody was doing. Say, oh, good. Joe did a phenomenal job. So it's just your point. It's your point. It's that team. They start rising. You have nowhere to go but rise with them. And and if it's all about you, they ain't going to be rising because it just doesn't matter how you can help them rise.
Well, and if it's all about you, I'll just make the professional sports analogy. Everybody loves the MVP, and rah, 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 the team's winning. And then when there's a downturn, who do they fire? Not the quarterback, not the defensive line, or they fire the manager or the coach. So yeah, that will keep you humble. I think is in, or when you watch. Have you ever? Well, I know you have. You watch after a professional athlete wins the MVP of whatever sport they're in, and you sit there and you listen, and if it's all, well, I did this and I did that, and I'm, yeah, you're going, I bet they hate him on the team, that egocentric, as opposed to you just like, it's so rare to hear that MVP, the kid that wins the Heisman Trophy, and he talks about not himself, but about his teammates, about his coaches, everybody else that helped make him successful is what is important, in their mind. And you go, that's a leader.
Yeah.
So
Actually, you're right. I just think about watching college football is the best place where whether the person's the MVP, whatever person the reporters decided made the difference in that game. And you see when they start with usually, this incredible team, and then it goes to some coach they had, maybe their mom, maybe whatever religious belief. It's always outside of them. Always the people you just like, wow, what an incredible human. That's how you think,
yeah.
I don't think, I don't know if I've heard too many say it was all about me. I think they're too clever in the newscast time, but I guess they're
Man, I
there.
don't know. I remember Muhammad Ali. And
Well,
what a
yeah,
great,
okay.
what a great, what a great
I'm talking
boxer!
about the
But
19-year-old kid that wins.
yeah, but there are I'm not going to mention names of certain
Yeah.
athletes,
No.
but
We have a
there
lot
are
of
some that you just go, man, what a north end of a southbound horse, and you shake your head going, I wouldn't want him on my team, or her on my team, whatever, and so it's just, but it's also taken me 60 some odd years to get this open mindedness
yeah.
going. But so I'm gonna kind of wrap it up, and I know I always ask everybody this question, or I try to. What's the one thing you were dying to share, but Pat didn't ask the right
Oh
question,
my gosh.
or we didn't get to it? But there's like, oh, Pat, I don't want to sign off until I share this particular insight or gem of wisdom or whatever it is.
It's interesting you say that. Because we've just been this whole conversation in a very positive way about stepping outside of yourself. It's not about you, right? And I just think that's probably, and I'm going to tell two quick stories. Do I have time for two
Oh
quick stories?
yeah, absolutely.
It's not about you and about listening and thinking about where they're coming from. This whole listening thing is the message I've heard you and me say around. And one time, the general counsel of BCG, I was the head of North American executive committee meeting, and she was telling me something. and I cut her off because I thought I knew where she was going to go because and she goes, would you shut the fuck, would you shut up and let me finish? It's like she slapped me. So she goes, Joe, you always cut me off before I finish. Now you could say that was an arrogant male thing, but also an impatient, I know what you're going to say thing, but I may not know what they're going to say, and it was really, this is like you, I was probably 62 years old. I was like, took a long time to figure that out. But this whole idea of shut up and listen, or I'll tell you another point, which you and I learned over time, and you alluded to this. Males think they're supposed to solve things, guys. And I remember when BCG did the annual reviews, we have upward feedback. It's anonymous, so young people can say what they want about the partners, and it can be tough. And there's always phone calls to me when I'm there, and one person, and often tears. And one person called, a woman, and she started, and I said, well, are you calling me to listen or to have an answer? She goes, no, just shut up and listen. I don't need you to have an answer. I just need to talk about it. And, these were two moments like, wow. So the whole idea of shutting up and listening are so critical. That we talked about a lot, but that's the thing I would drive home. If you're going to make a difference in any aspect. Well, you started at the beginning about how we don't listen to each other. I mean, we could talk about our country, but if we shut up and listen to each other, we can disagree, but at least try to figure out where someone's coming from, then figure out how to disagree.
Yeah.
It'd make a lot of progress, but anyway.
One of my favorite quotes is, and I don't even know where I learned this. Yes, you've been given a voice, but you have not been given the last word. Because what you think is the last word is just the start of a new argument.
Right. That's very good.
Oh man, Joe, what a great time to have a conversation and time together. I really appreciate you, and for our audience, I hope you walk away from this conversation being inspired, and will share it with your friends. Joe, if people want to learn more about what you're doing, about your book, or get some advice or whatever, how do they reach out to you?
Well, if they want to reach out to me, actually, people can leave a message on LinkedIn. And if it's not trying to sell me something, because I get a lot of those messages, I will respond giving you my email, and then we communicate. Essentially, I never used to pay attention to LinkedIn. I think I was so busy at BCG, I just didn't have time for anything. But actually, it's a good way to start a conversation. Obviously, I don't like to communicate within that messaging. And if you want to learn more about what I'm doing, I have a website, joedavis.com, very simple. And I post a lot on LinkedIn, so I'm sharing some of my thoughts. But reaching out, just leave a message on LinkedIn. I will always respond. I may not respond positively. If I can tell you want to sell me something, I'm not in.
No, I think LinkedIn is probably one of the best platforms that I use for that professional engagement and developing lasting relationships with people that I never would have met
Right.
otherwise.
No, it's very true.
Yeah, so it's just jump on LinkedIn and fire off a connection request and hook up with Joe. So how'd you get joedavis.com? That somebody didn't already have that.
Isn't that lucky as sin? Oh, I'll tell you, my social media team, they said, oh, look at this, you can grab it. I couldn't believe it. That's so simple. You'd think it'd be taken 50 times over.
Yeah,
Well,
like Joe Davis, 1,754.
644.
Oh man, well Joe, hey, thanks so much for having a inspiring conversation. Again, to our audience, thank you. Because of you, we're now download. We just broke 9,000 downloads in 75, a total of 75 countries and Hong Kong. And it's because of your commitment to be a warrior, servant, and leader in your part of the world that you're helping us share our message. So keep listening, downloading, liking, commenting, sharing our episodes with someone you know who needs to hear today's message. And always, connect with me on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, all those things. I don't know how to operate, but we're on there anyway. So
Figure it out.
yeah, look us up and join our over 900 subscribers. If you're on LinkedIn, which you should be, is for our LinkedIn at Pat Welsh JD. That's where we have our free Warrior Servant Leader newsletter, and we have well over 900 subscribers there. You'll get to be part of a family of like-minded people who are trying to change the world in their own part of the world. So until next week, I love you all. And remember, always, always, always strive to do the right thing at the right time, the right way, and for the right reasons, because that's what a warrior servant leader does every day, every time. See you next week.